For a relatively young country, our nation has been through a number of devastating traumas, including the assassinations of presidents and other public figures. If you're not old enough to have been alive during some of these events, you have certainly read about them or seen old newsreels of them on television. When President Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., Viola Liuzzo were killed, we as citizens stumbled backward in disbelief. Even people who were against the message these leaders promoted and the ideals for which they stood were shocked by the brutality and suddenness of their deaths. In the aftermath of their murders and funerals, we as a country seem to have lost our bearing, our sense of safety and security. We question the things we had taken for granted for so long: our freedom, our security, even our joy. In the days following these murders, there seemed to be a feeling of, what do we do now? What will happen to our people, to our movements, now that our leaders are gone? Who will take up the banner now? In a sense, we, like the disciples, found ourselves lost, confused, fearful of what lay ahead. This was especially true when it came to the safety of our future leaders and to their second lieutenants like Ralph Abernathy and Jesse Jackson, who shadowed Martin Luther King Jr. That was a time in which we came to anticipate working toward the vision of hope that King and Malcolm were guiding us to. We had come to believe that that vision was written and was within our reach. And so we experienced deep loss and profound confusion as to why our leaders were always the sacrificial lambs. Had our country considered these leaders people to be feared? In this place today, we have witnessed a reenactment of the horror, the pain, the complete and utter disbelief of the execution of Jesus Christ. And any one of us who has ever lost a friend or a loved one to violence, who has even read about or witnessed the murder of a public figure, as many did during the murder of John F. Kennedy and his accused assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald. Anyone who has been witness to murders like these understands the profound sense of loss and fear that come at such a time. The inability to accept what one knows to be true. In a death like Jesus's, in a death like Kennedy's, Malcolm's, or king, all people who were loved around the world. For followers of these visionaries, the loss was palpable. In the 1960s, even in rural East African villages, people who had only known of Kennedy through the work of the Peace Corps had photographs of him hanging on the walls of their mud and adobe dwellings long after he had died. People everywhere felt the loss of our bright young president, felt the hope that had been eagerly anticipated suddenly dashed. How does one process such a death? Over and over in those days as we traveled around the world, we Americans were asked, how do things like these happen in a country like yours? We ourselves asked the same question. How could these things have happened in our country? Those of us who were alive at that time were stunned and speechless at the senselessness of such madness. Mrs. Kennedy and her children had lost a husband and father. President Kennedy's siblings had lost a brother, his parents a son. Those close to him had lost a valued friend, and our country had lost a bright young leader, as well as our hope for the future. John Kennedy was a youthful president with a beautiful young wife and 2 preschool children whom our whole nation had come to cherish. Had he been an older man, we might have known better how to deal with such a death, horrible as it was. But with the loss of such a vibrant young man, we were too dazed, too stunned to know how to react. Fortunately, his young widow led us through the hazy days following his murder. And Vice President Lyndon Johnson, who few at the time expected to be able to pick up the mantle, did so and got us through the public nightmare. Johnson took the reins and held our country together and led us through the sorrow-filled days that lay ahead. And that's exactly what the disciples did in the aftermath of the crucifixion of Jesus. Few people expected those men who ran away when Jesus was taken into custody, who hid out near Jerusalem lest they be taken and crucified with him, that those men would find the strength to take up the work of their so-called master, teacher, rabbi. But they did. They continued to walk the path that he had begun leading them on. And maybe some of those disciples even surprised themselves when they found the strength to go on in spite of their own doubts and pain. I remember once hearing a great preacher put those thoughts into a question to a virtual Jesus, asking, who will take your place when you are gone? And this virtual Jesus assured him that his disciples would. And the questioner said, you mean that motley lot? Speaking, of course, of the disciples, some of whom would later run away in fear or hide in Jerusalem, others who would kill themselves in despair. You mean that group of fellas that kept around you? Jesus said, yes. And the questioner pressed on, what if they fail? And Jesus said, if they fail, I have failed. After 2,000 years plus, you and I and all the saints who followed Jesus are still traveling the path that he and the saints who followed him began. We too have picked up the mantle and continue to do the work that was passed on to us, because it is now our job to go up against the powerful institutions and principalities that seek to silence us, seek to beat us down, seek to destroy the desire of immigrant populations who look for refuge here, to keep them from entering into this land of ours. They all look to us. And it is up to us to take the torch that has been passed to us and not allow the work we are called to do, the love we are called to share, the strength we are called to show, fail or falter on our watch. It is now our time to run this leg of the race, our time to take the baton and pass it to the fresh legs of the ones who wait anxiously ahead, so that they can continue to advance the work of God in this part of God's universe.